The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where we explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. On today's show, I have Angus Taylor. Angus is CEO of Infused Products International, who are a pharmaceutical cannabinoid ingredient company based in Canada. Welcome, Angus. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Good. We've been trying to get this on for quite a while, so I'm glad we can make it work finally. Loads to talk about with Infused and some new products that you've got going on and stuff, which we'll get to in a minute. But, as is tradition, why don't we start with a bit about you and, how did you get into cannabis and how did Infused start?
Infused actually is my second cannabis company. The first, I suppose my career before cannabis was really as a management consultant. So I largely worked in innovation spaces, helping companies identify new technologies or new approaches to doing business and a lot about efficiency and the likes. When the legalization of cannabis in Canada was looking like a foregone conclusion, it sparked my interest from an innovation perspective. One of the most significant changes ever to happen in legal history in the last century. So I started looking around for some potential work, found some assignments with some licensed producers that were in the last stages of getting approved by Health Canada. I was really charged with doing some government relations work on their behalf to begin with, which found me in a conversation with officials around not so much the licensed producers or where cannabis was going to be grown and come from, but how was it going to be retailed? Because at that point, the federal government had projected to the provinces a date by which legal cannabis had to have a delivery mechanism and a retail sales environment, but it was really down to the provinces to try and deliver a model that made sense. So, I found myself at perhaps one of the first entrepreneurs to sort of hear that the government was having conversations and they were actively speaking about how policy was going to roll out. So it seemed like a great opportunity. I reached out to a couple of friends. We started a partnership and a company called New Leaf Cannabis. We ended up selling it about 2 years later to a licensed producer, by which time it was the largest brick and mortar retail chain in the country. So we sold them about 25 stores. And after leaving that, I still had some passion to be in the industry and certainly product opportunities attached to the Cannabis 2.0 period, which just began last year, were of great interest to me. So Infused Products really started as a product company with the eyes to make vape pens and edibles for the Canadian marketplace.
Wow, that's brilliant. And, what kind of learnings did you have going through that? I mean, 2019 was quite a rough year on the Canadian public markets for cannabis stocks. How do you look at all of those situations? It's been quite a roller coaster.
I think it's not surprising that there was a correction in the value of a lot of these cannabis companies, which had just skyrocketed in value, really kind of bucking most economic trends and the ways in which companies are evaluated. So it's not surprising also that some of the companies that were funded, that had maybe less experienced management teams, weren't able to actually deliver on the business models that they'd been promoting. So there was some companies that certainly struggled last year, some that were running out of cash, some that failed altogether. It does seem that the industry is on an upswing at this point. A lot of the major LPs have seen their stock prices return to almost pre-crisis level, if you want to call that what 2019 represented. But as a company that was looking for money last year, it wasn't easy to find interested investors, especially because the vast majority of private investment in the Canadian sector actually came from Canada itself. So when the industry here was in trouble, the investors that were excited about it started to cool their jets a bit. And now we're finding that those conversations are coming back. We've got financiers that are actually calling us and saying, hey, we're interested in understanding what your needs might be. So that's a real positive change, I think, in maybe the excitement or the interest that investors are returning to the sector with.
Yeah, that's very positive news. We'll come back to that in a minute, actually. But why don't we talk a bit more about Infused then? So, what actually do you do?
Well, Infused Products is our international company, but we've also launched Infused Amphora with its first set of SKUs. We're launching an inhale line actually this week, so it's super exciting. We have a CBD vape pen cartridge line that's coming out, available across the UK in brick and mortar stores, as well as our online website. So it's been 6 months of a lot of design work. We've got a very custom cartridge that looks beautiful, and custom formulations within each of those cartridges for desired effects. So this was part of the business plan we were going to roll out in Canada last year. And when we discovered what a vibrant and strong CBD industry there is in the UK, we thought this is making great sense for us to come over and bring this line.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, it's very popular here at the moment, despite kind of regulatory issues, let's say, at work in the background.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the regulatory, because we actually like the fact that the regulatory system is evolving. I know that novel foods feels a little sloppy being in the midst of it, but my experience with the rollout of cannabis policy in Canada is that it is difficult to do things the first time. And clearly there's no roadmap for the FSA to actually utilize. So we see imperfections in the way in which the system is currently structured, but inevitably these things change over time and they become better for both the industry participants. But most importantly, it's about consumer protection and the fact that these products are obviously being made in a wide variety of ways by people that may or may not actually know what they're doing. And obviously evidence has shown that some of these products don't contain what's promised. And the only way to root that out is with a stronger regulatory environment.
Yeah, no, that's a very good positive way to look at things. So when we're talking about your products and the vape products, what ingredients have you been putting in them, and how have you come to that?
Well, that's actually a big part of the research that we were doing. The concerns about the technology and ingredients are understandable because of the vape crisis that happened in California last year. It's interesting that not a lot of folks understand that it was really because the black market was cutting corners and trying to put inexpensive ingredients. It's like how the black market tries to cut any drug that it's selling to make more volume and charge the customer more. So in the case of California, they started adding vitamin E acetate, which when vaporized and exposed to lung tissue is actually very nasty. And most of the deaths that were associated with vaping last year were entirely because of vitamin E acetate. There is also some concerns, though, about propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. They are much more common food chemicals, certainly safe to ingest, but unclear about what their long-term health effects might be when vaporized, or whether, in fact, PG and VG cross the lung membrane and get absorbed by the body or not. We've chosen not to include any of those ingredients, obviously, in our own products. So we use a CBD distillate that we import from the US, and we add only terpenes, natural plant source terpenes to those formulations. That way we're certain that basically it's all plant and that there's no chemicals that would be made otherwise.
That's great. Yeah, and thank you for a reminder of that. We did have a show on it when it was live. I can't remember last year, but it was good to sort of remember that it was a black market issue. But inevitably, there will have been collateral damage to the whole vaping industry just through people not really understanding what the issue was.
And we have some concerns as well that in the UK there are some bad ingredients that we're noticing are in vape products. MCT oil, for instance, I've seen in numerous e-liquids, if I think they're being marketed as. MCT oil is just fine if you want to swallow it and take a tincture that dilutes CBD to a desired concentration. But again, when you take these chemicals and you turn them into vapor, you are fundamentally changing the way in which they interact with the body. And it's quite clear, some evidence, well, I don't say it's quite clear. There's evidence emerging that MCT is not a safe vaping chemical, yet it still exists in the industry here. So not that I'm hoping regulation comes quick, because it's still a process for a business to overcome when regulatory pressures come down. But at the same time, I'm concerned that, a very safe way to consume cannabis or CBD in this case will start to be thought of as unsafe because of bad ingredients and bad producers that are unfortunately making bad products.
Yeah, it is a concern, but it's good that you guys have taken the time to sort of really research what you're doing and put together kind of a whole plant solution. So before we get into a bit more about vaping in itself, we'll finish off talking a bit about Infused. How has COVID treated you? I mean, we met just before it all kicked off in March, I think, and the world's slightly different now.
You're right. I was last in the UK on March 7th, and I think it was only 2 or 3 days later that the Canadian government shut down all flights, and the lockdown began, I think, a week after I returned. So it was, and I'd just been on stage at First Wednesdays talking about how excited I was we all were going to be bringing out our vape line in June. And sure enough, the shutdown changed all of those plans. It slowed us down a little bit, I would say, probably a couple months worth of delays attributable to, how challenging it's been to get stuff out of China, how, where our packaging is sourced versus our cartridges versus our ingredients. And all of that is slowed down a little bit by our plan. Probably the biggest impacts on launch, though, like we're this is a brand. We want the brand to be in consumers' hands. We want them to see how much effort we've put into making our products look fantastic and how well they work. So the normal way that you do that would be, in-person kind of launch events, pop-ups, those kinds of things. Obviously, that's not possible today. So we're hopeful that we can get back to the UK sooner rather than later. A little worried about the shutdowns again that appear to be coming, but it's certainly our intent to try and get back to the UK and promote these products the way that you normally would do brand launches.
Yeah, I mean, it would inevitably have a big impact. And have you found any ways that you're sort of pivoting or working around that instead? Have you bolstered the sort of online campaigns?
From a sales perspective, for sure, in the original plan, we were leaning more on brick and mortar retail with the expectation that vape stores across the UK would be quite interested in our product. It will stand out on the shelf and look very different from everything else that's sold in the category. But we certainly saw in the first lockdown that there was a massive increase in online sales for CBD products, especially those that elicit effects around anxiety reduction and sleep, which obviously many people were really struggling with, over the months. So we really invested heavily in our website, infusedamphora.com. And on that, we publish articles and blogs about CBD. So our educational resources on the site are fantastic. And as of this week, it'll be a fully operational e-commerce site as well. So you'll be able to buy our products directly, which we're also really excited about.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Well, just to finish off this bit, was you mentioned it before. How have you found the fundraising environment, if you're looking to raise money?
Well, fundraising has been a real challenge, especially for our project in St. Vincent. It's a large extraction facility that we're trying to build on the island. And with the market in Canada really taking a beating last year, it made investors, even over in London, quite shy, I would say. And we had some interest over the winter, a couple term sheets out in January that were being evaluated, and we thought we were on a road to success. But of course, then the interruption of COVID just shut all of these conversations down. Everybody has been back in February and March was definitely trending to a wait and see. But this is actually changing now. I think that it's really helped that the Canadian large LPs have really recovered almost completely with their stock price. And as a result, investors are actually coming back to the industry and going, okay, we see that the crisis is over. These companies have settled down. Some of the management issues have been fixed, and the whole industry will be more predictable now. So the investors can get back into a realm of comfort, which we're starting to see.
Yeah, I hope so. That's great news. Cool. Okay, so to talk about actual vaping. Would you mind giving us a bit of a summary on sort of the advantages of, vaping in the way that you guys are doing? So that's like an oil cartridge versus the different ways that you can, smoking flower or tinctures or the various other ingestion methods.
So, first of all, to make distillate, what you're really doing is you're extracting the cannabis oil from the plant material itself. The fibrous, sort of woody biomass part has no medicinal value. It doesn't contain any of the chemicals that are active from a cannabinoid perspective. So, by separating the biomass, you're essentially taking all of the carbon out of the equation, and you're being left with oil and terpenes and other cannabinoid and chemicals and the like. So first of all, if you're just going to compare against smoking, the big difference there is that you're not combusting. So when you smoke flower, you burn the flower. By burning the carbon element of the biomass, you develop tars, and a lot of the sort of negative health implications of smoking are really created by the fact that the biomass is being combusted. The oils are vaporized by the same temperature and the same process. And really, from an absorption perspective, the oils are vaporizing as they're being combusted. And in that form, they're very easy to absorb in the body. So the difference between a vape cartridge or a vape pen and smoking really is not that different when it comes to the actual absorption of the cannabinoids. The difference is that you don't have all of the bad stuff associated with smoking at the same time. Right. Now, compared to ingestion, there's certainly a lot of difference. So the pathway to the body that's going through the lungs is very fast, which is why you should feel the effects of CBD or cannabinoids when you inhale it within 15 or 20 minutes. If you ingest CBD, mind you, the pathway is to travel through the stomach into the intestines. In the small intestines is where CBD is absorbed into the bloodstream. Through the hepatic vein, it goes into the liver first before it's distributed around the body. And within the liver's where all chemicals in the body get broken down. So CBD that's being absorbed through the stomach, before it even gets anywhere, the liver's starting to work on it. So what we talk about is a concept called bioavailability, which basically means that the amount of CBD that you bring into the body is the amount that's actually absorbed in the body. And by inhaling, it's almost a maximum amount of bioavailability, because almost all of the CBD that you ingest through the lungs makes it into the bloodstream, whereas CBD that's ingested and comes through the stomach or through the intestines, less so. So the dosing is slightly different, which is always why it's a little complicated when you're trying to compare how many milligrams of CBD are present in a vape pen versus how many milligrams are present in a tincture. It's a bit of confusion for the customer, and one we're trying to educate around so they understand how they're actually getting more by seeing less.
Yeah. It's a tricky concept to get, I guess. Right. And so, and actually I should have asked this before, what are the kind of need states that your different products are dealing with in terms of ailments, etc.?
Sure. We have 4 formulations currently. One is to help people fall asleep generally. So we call that Zeds, so 4 Zeds in a row. We have one that's meant to be sort of a pick-me-up, get you inspired, thinking out of the box. We call it Inspire. We have one that is calming, which we call Peace. And we have one called Mend, which is more for athletic recovery. So a lot of these formulations, we call them top tier formulations in that they have the capability to also work in ingestible formats or in topical formats. So we will see as we develop our product pipeline that the Mend formulation, for instance, will become a topical that people can use as a joint cream as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this category because I think, particularly for calm, which I assume is dealing with some levels of anxiety, having something that gets into your system quite quickly could be a very good thing. In the same way that smokers sometimes have a cigarette to sort of calm their nerves, having a quick CBD vape could be a good way if you're feeling a bit stressed in a certain situation.
We're certainly hopeful that people are going to enjoy our product and definitely feel the difference the formulations are meant to intend.
Yeah. And so if I can ask you, and if you're not revealing any trade secrets, are you with the 4 different areas, are you effectively, is it the different terpenes that's sort of making them more appropriate for each different state?
That's right. So in cannabis formulation philosophy, terpenes are part of what's described as the entourage effect. So if you look at it at a cannabis plant or a hemp plant for that matter, the flower contains dozens of different types of chemicals on it. Cannabinoids are one category. CBD and THC are the most commonly known, but there are 30 odd cannabinoids. I think there's over 100 that have been identified. It's 20 common ones that will begin to be part of, I guess, the formulator's recipe book. So to get an entourage effect to work, what you're really doing is combining cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. Together, they do something that individually these chemicals do not elicit. So by designing particular terpene formulations in the combination of 4 or 5 or 6 different terpenes, you can specify or you can drill into a desired effect based on how these terpenes are acknowledged to influence the body.
Right. So it must be formulators making up these crazy recipes, and it must be quite fun, actually. I need to get a formulator.
At the end of the day, they're really mimicking a plant. So, there are literally thousands of different cannabis cultivars. And within that are specific ratios. If the plant is stabilized as a particular cultivar, then the profile, the chemical profile of that plant becomes reasonably well known. And by mimicking what the plant does naturally with terpenes, you can design a formulation for a specific outcome.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool. Well, look, I mean, we're getting towards the answer for my last question. What new areas are you looking into? Where do you see this going? And it's very hard to predict anything at the moment, but
Well, I think formulating's got lots. There's lots of exciting potential around new formulations that are coming up. We've got a couple more recipes that we're hoping to incorporate into products in our pipeline. I'm interested in seeing how cannabinoids can become integrated into a larger nutraceutical pathway where cannabis-based products become part of a normal health and wellness regime. So just as you would take a daily vitamin, there will be nutraceutical products that incorporate cannabinoids to give you more effective results. And I think, the MEND formulation would be a great example of that, where there's clearly other non-medicinal ingredients that are being used in that category for pain and joint relief. But the addition of cannabinoids and terpenes to those recipes makes them even better. So that's where I see there's going to be a lot of really interesting product development. Our license package in St. Vincent has grown to also include an R&D license for psilocybin and for medicinal plant and mushrooms across the entire category. So we're really looking at where some of the combinatory opportunities between medicinal plants and cannabinoids might exist. It's more sort of basic R&D as far as psychedelics are concerned, but I feel that the future is looking really exciting for that medicinal plant category. And we're getting a really early start on being able to do some R&D work down in St. Vincent that we're really, really pumped about.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a really exciting area where, the focus isn't just on cannabis-derived constituents. It's mixing it in with other plant-based compounds that are known to have effects in certain areas. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, some of our medicinal research down in the Caribbean is also on a plant called ibogaine, which is one of the most significant treatments for drug addiction, especially addiction to opiates. Ibogaine has the potential to alleviate cravings and the addictive psychological elements of opiate addiction for extended periods of time. It's a bush that grows in West Africa. It's a really interesting plant. So that's all part of the medicinal plant campus that we're developing down there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look forward to hearing more as that progresses. Angus, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really glad we got this done.
Real pleasure, Anish. Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, and look forward to speaking to you again.
You bet. See you in the UK.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining me for that. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did enjoy it, please hit subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use. I'd also love a nice 5-star review on iTunes if you have the time. You can also follow the Cannabis Conversation page on LinkedIn and also sign up to my mailing list via cannabis-conversation.com. Until next week, have a good one.